Hey everyone. Oh, am I on? Create a room by everyone. I don't know what this is about. Oh, oh my god. Is this thing teaching me while I'm live? I guess there's new stuff on Instagram right now. Okay. Okay, I hope you guys didn't see that. Hey everyone, how's everyone doing? Today we're doing an episode of Lorini Behind the Scenes. This is a show where you guys get to see people working on current projects that they've just finished, and they get to tell us all about it. So they'll show us or describe to us what their project was about. They'll run us through their numbers, and they'll also be sharing with us all the problems they've encountered and how they solve them, and if it's something new for them, what they've learned. So I think it's always fun to do these kind of shows because you can see that in this crazy market, things, you're always having things happen, but people come winning. Some of them, you may come with a learning experience and you maybe don't have any gains, but you at least come with learning and how to change it. And you, the audience, gets to actually you guys get to learn from those mistakes. So if you guys ever do the kind of projects that these people do, this is the best way to learn, I would say, right guys? So here I can see we have Thomas on, so I'm just gonna request that he come on. Give me a second, guys. Okay, should be on. Hey Thomas, how are
Hey, how
you?
are you, Diana?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good, doing good.
Thanks for coming on. We're excited to hear about the project that you're going to be talking to us about. And before we get started with that, do you want to just tell the viewers a little bit about yourself?
Sure, of course. So many of you know I'm originally from Toronto, Canada. I started investing about 10 years ago in real estate. And since then, I've moved to California. Been out here for about 8 years now. But I do continue to invest back in Canada and in the US. Here locally in Orange County, I'm a realtor, so I help people, purchase and sell their personal residency, but also investment properties as well. And I'm all about sharing value and kind of helping educate people into investing in real estate. I've seen what's done in my life, my family's life, and those around me. So I'm thankful to be here today, Diana, and I kind of love to share, whatever I can.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much. So, what project are you going to be talking to us about?
So when we spoke, you were asking me specifically for some story and a project of some challenges, something that could be like an educational component. And over the years, as if you're long enough in real estate, you're gonna hit some challenges. You're gonna have some projects that don't go as smooth as you'd like. So today I want to talk about a mixed-use building that I acquired in 2017. So the background was this property was on the MLS, and it was on there for quite a while. So I would see it over the course of 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and this property is still in the market. I mean, I wonder why. Although it was a market, I mean, at that time, pretty strong, for a property to sit like that for several months, it was questioning. So basically, I inquired and looked into it, and what it was a 9-unit mixed-use building. So I had commercial on the first floor, residential over, and basically, what I found out was the current owner had owned it for a long time, but basically deferred all maintenance. So the property was in pretty rough shape, and 3 of the 4 commercial units were vacant. So the numbers weren't working. In terms of getting financing, the lenders were not lending on it at an attractive rate. You would have to put down considerable amounts of capital to get proper financing. So we had to walk through, and we also realized that the residential tenants, I mean, were very rough. I guess, one person got in and they invited all their buddies, and it was kind of like a frat house scenario. Like, it was a mess.
Oh
So
no.
yeah, it was pretty rough, I mean, condition, but we felt, I mean, obviously there's risk in real estate, but we felt we can convert this building. I mean, there's definitely an opportunity there. The location was great, like a solid, I would say a B plus A area. So the location was prime on a nice section of a busy road, one of the main roads in the city. And, we made an offer, and the seller wasn't willing to budge on the price, but he was willing to entertain a VTB. So we felt, all right, we're able to hold back about 30%. So that would give us more usage of our capital to reposition the asset. So we're like, all right, fine. So in terms of numbers, the property was in the market for 440,000. We're able to carry back 100,000. So at closing, we only come up with 340 grand. We bought it cash. Seller carried for a year at 5%. So now, this was a new market as well. So that there was some risk in terms of timing and getting familiar with different contractors. So once we close, we start reaching out to our realtor and other people in the city for contractors. And then we found one, and we said, okay, our game plan is start renovating units, unit by unit, and start filling them with tenants. So we figured the commercial units were vacant at that time initially. However, really, we wanted to tackle, the residential. So what we did was we hired a paralegal, and we basically had them draft a letter and approach all the tenants and explain, new ownership. And basically, we're going to reposition the entire building. So we'd like to work with you and, incentivize them a bit. So out of the 5 residential units, we were able to get, I think, 2 of them out quickly. We negotiated a price that they were agreeable to, and they were out within a month or 2. So that allowed us to begin the renovation process. So we got the first one going, contractors start to renovate, and we start, communicating with the other tenants. Funny enough, 3.5 weeks after we closed, there was a massive flood in the area, and the whole first floor of the building was flooded. So we got a call from the one tenant, that one commercial tenant, which was a barber, and he's like, the building is flooded, and we're like, what is going on? So lo and behold, the whole area, he's sending a video to us, and we're like, wow, literally there was like a foot of water pouring from the main street into the building. And luckily the contractor was there, so he was trying to make some kind of access for the water to go. It was just filling the unit up, so he had to cut some holes in the floors, let the water escape. So it was a couple of days of just nonstop water. It was one of those 50 or 100-year flooding scenarios in this particular city. And make a long story short, it was a pretty disastrous scenario. We had to file a claim, and then, insurance contractors came out, they assessed it, blah, blah, blah. And, what ended up happening was that we got reimbursed. It took 5 months to get paid out. But, we basically started, getting our contractors involved to expedite the process. And then we got reimbursed, down the line. So 1 month into this property, building has a flood scenario. We get one tenant upstairs, and we start to work on it. So
were you super stressed?
Yeah, it was, because I don't live in that city. I'm over here. I had some partners back in Canada involved, and they're not also local to that city. So you're doing a lot of this stuff over video calls. And again, it is stressful because you're trying, we didn't have really solid, deep relationships with these individuals, contractors and whoever. So there was some challenge there. So, fast forward, it was a 1.5-year project. And we ended up, slowly. The first unit, thankfully, was pretty quick. The second one was okay, but we had to fire that contractor due to the timing and its pricing. It just wasn't a good relationship. So there was a period that we had to stop, find a different contractor. That takes time. So you have weeks and weeks of nothing happening. And at the same time, you've got a considerable burn going. You've got a considerable overhead to absorb with pretty much no revenue coming in. So imagine you have the initial cash outlay, which was all cash. Then you've got, the utility, the tax, insurance that you're paying monthly. And you've got very little revenue coming in. And a
point that you said that I think is important to I just want to reiterate, because I find I had a similar experience, is that when ours was subs, But when I feel like that's a problem. When you go to a city that you don't have your team there, that's when you really realize
Yeah.
how crucial your team is. Because I had a similar scenario where it's like we had to use new people. And same thing, you're like struggling to work with them or like because you don't have that relationship. So I don't know if they don't care about you or you just happen to pick like, the wrong person that's like lazy or whatever it is. But it's something that I just wanted to reiterate because it is important and it's exactly like this. I feel like this always happens. You're always going to have problems when you go into a new city. Um, it's just like finding the team and it takes time. Like you got to rotate through people and figure out like who blends together.
Right. And what I find also with contractors, in nature of their business, they tend to take on more jobs than they can really handle. They never tend to
Mm-hmm.
say no, so they overbook, overcommit themselves, and then they're bouncing around different projects, especially when they know this could be the only project they have with you. So in terms of loyalty, they may have good intentions, but they're like, this may be the one off. I'm going to be working with Diana. So, I mean, it's great that you're giving the business now, but what happens next month and the month after, where they may have some repeat clients that they got to continue to service and want to squeeze in. So they're always like squeezing in. So they'll tell you, oh, it's a 1 month project. And this now, I kind of like double the timeline any contractor tell me. If it's 1 month, it's 2 months, or even 3 months. I mean, it's just a reality that we face. So I'm mentally prepared. And that's what ended up happening. Like this project, initially thinking like, all right, 6, 7 months, but it really took a year and a half to reposition the entire building. So it went
Mm-hmm.
from one contractor to another, and then you've got like other challenges like the roof. So we decided to do the roof. I mean, there was just a few, instances where it was leaking. So we're all right. We got to address the roof. Hire a roofing company, and it was like getting late in the season, like October, and they're like, all right, we can schedule this in just before we close for the season. So the material was brought in early December, and they laid it on the roof, and then we got hit by a snowstorm. And then it's like, oh boy, what do we do now, right? So like, all right, let's wait
Mm-hmm.
till when it melts. So December goes by, January goes by, and we're like, oh my gosh. I'm like, this is like 2 months. February goes by. It wasn't until like March, so like 3.5 months later, when the snow melted and they can actually go there and start working on the roof. So, I mean, and through that, you've got issues, tenants are complaining, it's got some leakages here and there. You got the material sitting there getting kind of constantly wet and so forth. So there was that challenge. Whatever. Like, and then, okay, so the building had a rear parking lot. And then we found out that there was a sewer. Well, the water was just flooding the whole back parking lot when we acquired the building. We're like, what's going on here? We called contractors out, and they're like, well, you've got the system, the sewer system was all collapsed and it was all broken. And they're like, this is never going to drain. We have to go in, dig in the whole sewer line to the city and redo the entire thing. And we're like, oh my gosh. So including like a manhole and everything. So this was
Oh no,
another big
that's
job.
expensive.
It was massive. It was massive. They got huge, heavy equipment, dug in very deep. And I've never even seen these like huge concrete casings that go underground, and then you have to tie it in. So I'm like, these are stuff that we didn't initially have budgeted for. So we're like, all right, 30, 40, 50 grand is flying left and right? But what are you going to do? You're in the midst of it. I'm like, if we don't address this now, and it's never going to resolve itself. So, and you don't want to do it
Exactly.
later on when you've got like 9, 10 tenants living in the building. So we're like, all right, you bite the bullet and just get it done. So more money going out, more money going out. And we're like, all right. I'm like, all right, we got to do this, we got to do that. And then one of the commercial units was a large unit. At the back, we felt like the flooring was very like uneven or not supportive. So contractors go in like, oh my gosh, the floor is all rotted right through. Like literally, you can walk on, you can fall through. So we're gonna have to rebuild the subfloor. So we had to actually go in and jack up the building and one part of it because it was sagging. So call in
Oh,
a special company to come in, and they've got these huge like 8x8 support beams, like 10 feet long. There's a number of those under the building, actually cranking jacks to re-level the building. So it was like one thing after another. Interesting enough, it's like looking back, it's kind of fun experience-wise, going through it. but when you're in the midst of it, it's stressful. It's stressful because you're
Oh my
like,
God.
am I wasting money? I'm like, do I really need to do this? Is this being done right? And like, your
You
talent
question
is growing.
everything about yourself, right? You're just like, oh my God, this is like the worst decision ever.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
did
like,
I
when does
make
it end?
a good decision?
It's like, when does this end? It's like bleeding, and it's like you're just constantly bleeding. Like, please, like, stop. Front windows, doors, like one thing after another, and it's like, all right. So thankfully, like we got the old tenants. Okay, so the tenants upstairs, like I mentioned earlier, like they were really like questionable. So we got majority of them out, but then one individual wasn't paying rent and was just squatting. And literally, I've never seen a condition where the person would just like their garbage was the entire floor of the unit. They were literally like eat something and throw it on the floor. It's like they do something, throw it on the floor. So it's like just garbage. And it was scary that by the time the person left, my team had to go with shovels of stuff.
Wow.
And you see sometimes like, it's funny, you see like a picture of like a hoarding house or, people just living conditions. And it was like one of that. It's like, wow. It was scary, but just like it was crazy to kind of witness again the living conditions of some people. But anyways, we
Mhm.
got the person out and went in to renovate these units. And slowly, we used a third party property manager to find us tenants. And we were able to put in quality tenants, paying market. And so the all 5 residential tenants were all put in place. Then we started focusing on all the commercial units one by one, going in and renting them out. So this entire project took about a year and a half, but thankfully, we were able to reposition it. Just changing contractors or subbing out certain contractors, like the windows with a different company. That's another thing. Unless you really have a general contractor overseeing everything, it kind of falls onto you to make these connections, because it's like, okay, well, the main contractor is like, well, I just do the interior renovations. And someone else is like, well, I do the repointing of the bricks. And someone else, I'm only the roofer. So, that's another thing. It's like, do you have the time, energy to get involved to that capacity? You may want to, you save some money, but then there's a lot of time and effort you got to consider the amount of time you're putting into it. So looking back,
Mhm.
it was good for that time, but if I do today, I may probably invested more time in finding a quality general contractor to kind of oversee the whole thing and just say like, listen, bud, this is what I need. I'm gonna hand it off to you. Just get it done.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think it's also just like probably back then you were a lot newer. I don't know if this was a new project, but it's new to you. But at least learning it
Yeah.
and understanding it probably helped you a lot more now, right? Because you were so in it, you probably have a much better understanding of how things work
Yeah.
that really helps you now to give you that confidence to have that contractor that takes care of everything, but you understand enough that, they can take care of everything and they tell you things and that communication's there.
Yeah, I agree. Again, this was about 5 years ago. So definitely, one thing I want to kind of like share with the audience, I'm like going through challenges and hardship, although it sucks when you're in the midst of it, I'm like, it really stretches you, and that's where you really grow. Like, and then sometimes we hope for nothing to happen, but it's almost looking back, I'm glad some of these challenges have happened. It's exactly what you said, Diana. Now my confidence level is a lot higher, and I can lean on experts, but I know exactly what things to kind of keep in mind and know when someone's on the right track or people are kind of like BSing me type of thing.
Mhm.
Um,
And
so
probably like if it happens to you now, I bet you your stress levels are probably so much more less because you're like, oh, that's it. Okay, just get my contractor to work on it. It's like back then, it was really stressful to do it just because it was your first time. I feel like when it's your first anything happens, doesn't even matter if it's like the smallest thing, but if it's like your first time, it's like the biggest problem in the world. And then you look back and you're like, that's not that big of a deal. What was I thinking? I mean, that your
exactly.
was a big project, but I'm
Yep.
just saying like in general also sometimes even the little things will like you'll blow it way out of proportion
Yes.
and then you look back and you're just like that was actually not that bad.
I
Or in
agree.
your case, I mean it was pretty crazy, but at least you learned a lot from it and hopefully you still, you still ended up winning from it.
Exactly. So if I can give kind of like a high level in terms of the numbers of this entire project. So I mentioned earlier, we bought the building for $440,000. We invested in total just under $200,000. So I think it was around 180. So we were all in for just over $600,000.
And just before you say the rest, just because
Yeah.
curious, so what was your, so you said you were a year and a half. What was your expected budget? Like how much did you initially have, like what was your expected renovations and your expected time frames for this project?
So it's 9 units. So we figured depending on how fast we can get tenants turned over, we were estimating anywhere from like $20,000 to $25,000 per unit. Well, I would say $20,000 at that time per unit. So it's 5 upstairs. That's about 100 grand, and then the downstairs probably another like 30, 40 grand. So I think we were initially around the 150,000 range, and we probably, when we factor in the roof and a few other things, we were around the $200,000 mark. So we were off, but it wasn't necessarily like we wasted money. I think it was more along the lines of, these additional improvements that we didn't necessarily think we had to do it so soon.
Yeah. And it just adds so much value. And I feel like especially if you're holding it, you know it's like you don't have to, for example, worry for that roof. If
Yeah,
it's a flat roof, especially those things are expensive. So you just get it done and you know they'll last you for a while. Or especially
yeah.
like that, the sewer system. I mean, that will last you even longer than a roof will.
Oh yeah. That probably lasts like
So it's
80
like at
years.
least it's money spent, but you know, like you exactly, and it's actually you. To be honest, in my view, your over budget is not even that bad. I was thinking it would be much more of a difference. So I feel like it sounds like a very big win because I mean,
Right.
again, I do lots of renovation. I should say like we have a renovation company, so I see a lot, and I feel like that's actually not bad. It looks like you guys did really well, even for it going over budget.
Yeah, I know. I'm thankful that I had a partner who was able to be a little bit more like involved, like not necessarily there all the time, but would drive in, check in a little bit more than obviously I could because I'm not there locally. So that definitely helped because if they know no one's one thing about contractors, if they know no one's coming by, they could really stretch things out. So one thing,
Hmm.
even today, I really request updates, like constant pictures and video updates, to just to keep them in check and just make sure they're on schedule. So that was one of the things. So definitely thankful for my partner was able to go by, and yeah, because we stretched it to a year and a half. If we could have done the project probably faster, but paying more money. So that's the trade-off. Sometimes you need to consider. Do you want it fast and good? Well, then you gotta pay higher money, more money.
Hmm.
Or are you okay with dragging it out, a little slower process and maybe saving some capital? So perhaps
Hmm.
if we had done it within like 6, 7 months, it could probably cost another 100 grand, by bringing
Hmm.
maybe like a general contractor, kind of like oversee things and really push things along, or bring their own team in-house team that does everything. Yeah, I could probably see that. So the trade-off was, 6, 7 more months, but savings of upwards to $100,000, something like that.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it makes sense. And so around then the 1.5 year mark, did you guys refinance the property
Yeah,
to pull out?
correct. So I mean, one step back. So what happened was, the VTB was up at the 1 year mark. So then we said,
Hmm.
well, our project isn't done yet. We're not ready to refinance. So we had to actually go look for some additional private money to kind of like address the $100,000, because we were just pouring our capital into the building. So we don't want to
Hmm.
like pay off the VTB. So we went and sourced some private capital, paid off the VTB, paid a little bit higher rate than the VTB, but at the end of the day, I think it was well worth it. So we can focus our resources directly on the improvements. So yeah, at a
Hmm.
year and a half, we went to the bank and basically said we want to refinance the building. So what's the process? We send an appraiser out. So they come in, do the appraisal. It's a little lengthier process once you get into commercial, a little longer time period than just your normal residential
How long is it
appraisal.
for commercial?
Well,
Especially at that time. Maybe things are different now.
yeah, of course, different times, different periods, but in general, the cost is higher. I think it costs close to $3,000 for the appraisal, and that time period, I think it was like around a month. So
Oh,
it's
that's not that
longer.
bad,
Yeah,
actually.
I mean, today could be longer, but yeah, I
Yeah.
remember like, all right, scheduling it, they come out and then they need at least a couple of weeks before it's completed. So you got to factor that in your
Yeah.
timeline
But
when you're
actually, I
starting to
guess
refi.
also yours wasn't that long. Wait, so are you talking about the refinance or closing when you bought the property for the appraisal and I mean, you're talking about the
The
refinance time, right?
refinance. The refinance.
Oh, okay, okay. And you
Yeah.
you guys went into traditional financing on the
Well, we
refi?
use the local credit union
Okay,
because of the
yeah.
mixed
Oh, okay.
use. Yeah, because
Yeah.
of the mixed use,
Oh,
we end up going with the local credit union because
mm-hmm.
again, I found sometimes when these like areas, some of the traditional lenders, just the A lenders, number one is commercial. They may not have a commercial division. Then it's mixed use. So we found some guys who lend on commercial, didn't lend on mixed use. And
Mm-hmm.
also it's outside some of their main business areas. So we ended up finding someone locally who understood exactly, I mean, the location, understood the asset, and they lended on it. So we ended up, yeah, finding a local credit union doing refi through them.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. And so what did the final verdict on the number?
Yeah. So final verdict after a year and a half, the property appraised for $1 million.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah. So at that time, we were able to refinance the property, pull out our 600 and change, and then have about 35, close to 40% equity still in the building, and the building carried itself perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
So thankfully, it ended up being a BRRRR that worked well. We got our capital back, paid off that private first, and then call it a day. And we still own that building. It's gone up significantly in valuation since 2017. But yeah, I mean, looking back, I mean, it was a period that's very stressful, but I mean, it was well worth it. I mean, I'm not saying every deal is going to be that way, but looking back
Mm-hmm.
on different properties and challenging situations, I mean, they've all, in general, with real estate being pretty forgiving, and especially if you buy and hold, in the last 10 years, either in Canada or US, the market's done fairly well. So you should have, you see a good return. So yeah, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that project was definitely a learning experience, and for myself, doing everything virtual, a lot of texting, a lot of video calls, a lot of emails, and just trying to coordinate different people. It's not always easy, and put a considerable amount of time into it, sweat equity, but it worked out. So I'm happy.
100%. Yeah, that's great to hear.
Yeah.
And so was this like your first mixed use property or had you
This
already
was my
bought
first. This was
others?
my first mixed use, correct? And that's another thing. I,
Oh,
I talk about this a lot. I own 3 mixed use buildings currently, and I think it's a market segment that a lot of investors kind of shy away from. But I think there's definitely opportunity there. And
mm-hmm.
I think a lot of investors shy away from it because they say, oh, commercial. I mean, the vacancy rate's higher. I mean, we've got COVID considerations over the last couple of years, vacancy, a lot of people maybe working from home, a lot of units are, I mean, yeah, vacant. So I don't want to necessarily go into that market because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I find sometimes your competition for a mixed use may be lower. So you're not bidding over that other 5 or 7 or 10 plex that every investor is going after. So your competition means less. And also, I think if you understand the market, it's a decent location, and if you have a good realtor or property manager, you can kind of like get a good feeling of what kind of tenant profile, if you renovate the unit, and you can expect. And
Mm-hmm.
thankfully, I mean, all through COVID, all my commercial units have been leased. Had a couple
That's
turn, I had,
amazing.
yeah, a couple turnovers, but I found that if you are providing a nice, clean, unit, and the location is great, you can find quality tenants. If you got a good team behind you, I mean, the property managers or realtors you're using to market it, and your ask in terms of rent is reasonable, you should be able to do well. And I'll give you one
Mm-hmm.
example. I mean, here's an example. I closed on a mixed use 2.5 weeks ago, and there was four commercial tenants in there, long-term tenants. One of them was there for 31 years. The other ones
Oh,
were
wow.
between 7 to 10 years. So all long-term tenants, but they were all on month-to-month leases. And I was kind of shocked. I'm like, wow. I mean, they went month to month all these years. So I went in, well, with my property, I communicated with my property manager. I said, we want to go in, we want to solidify leases. They'll feel safe that, we're not trying to kick them out. Explain to them that we're going to do some improvements to the building. So they feel like, all right, because there's a lot of deferred maintenance again, but we don't want them to pay higher rent. So we'll kind of find like a happy medium. And, it's only been 2 weeks. And so far we've solidified 3 out of the, there's 3 out of the 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 3 of the, sorry, 5, because there's another one at the back. 3 out of the 5 commercial units we've solidified into minimum 1-year leases, and we've bumped
Mm-hmm.
up the rents about a couple $100 each. And what that's
Oh,
done
wow.
now, what that's done in terms of valuation, the property value has gone up a couple $100,000 just from doing that in a couple of
That's
weeks.
amazing.
So
Yeah.
something to think about, because commercial real estate works on a different kind of rules and considerations than a residential. You're not working on the same landlord-tenants laws. As a landlord, you have more control, and the tenant itself, they cover a lot of the, interior stuff. So really, just
Mm-hmm.
provide them a clean, safe environment. But the major stuff like the roof and the HVAC is working, but then it's for them to address everything else. And on top of it, they're not there
Mm-hmm.
24 hours a day. They're only there within working hours. So it's great. In terms of the usage and the wear and tear on the building, it's a lot less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think just in these times, it's more about just making sure you find like those right tenants that you know will stay long term, which
Yeah.
in your case they are. So it's just kind of like a very big win for you getting that property, because if they've been there for that long, the chances of them leaving now is very minimal.
I agree. For a couple $100, like if one was paying 7 and market's 1,000, and you say, listen, let's kind of meet at $900, and we'll lock you in a minimum of 1 year. In terms of a business kind of decision, it makes sense for them. And the type of business also, like it's a mix. I've got a baker, I've got like a barber shop, a women's clothing store, computer repair guy. So it's a mixture of different types of tenants. But these are stuff that I think like people need. Yes, everything's going virtual, everything's online, but I'm like, you can't get a haircut virtually. So you still need to find
I was
a
just gonna
barber shop,
say, getting a virtual haircut might be a little iffy.
right?
Yeah, 100% agree. Going back actually just to your other project that we were talking about, I'm just curious about um, before you bought it, what kind of vetting do you do for a mixed commercial? What kind of vetting was done? Like,
Sure,
yeah,
and
in
especially
the
a newer
commercial mix.
area. I reached out to several different realtors just to get familiar with the city, areas to stay away from, things to know about. One agent in particular provided a map and really circled areas that are A, B areas, other areas really areas to stay away from or hadn't gentrified yet, C areas. So we got familiar with that, and as properties came up and we were reviewing, and my partner would go schedule time to do walkthroughs and provide feedback, we're like, okay, what'd you think about this? So it took months. It wasn't like the first time we went out there, we made an offer and we bought it. So I would say it probably took a good 3 to 4 months before we actually we were making offers, but until we actually solidified that purchase, it was several months into it. So in terms of
Mhm.
the process, you really want to know the area, and really you got to lean on to locals, realtors, property managers, or you're probably 1, 2 individuals that you really want to build a strong relationship with. And then from that, you look at the properties and the opportunities, the cost associated to it, unit price, current rent, are they provided vacant or they're tenanted, all these considerations. And then as we start looking for opportunities, mixed use came up, and we're like, well, what about considering that? Because initially, prior to that, it was only residential. I'm like, well, let's consider it. For the right price, that sort of thing. So, when we bought 9 units for just over $400,000, we're like, all right. Cost wise, that's pretty good. But we figured, okay, we got to invest capital into fixing it up and all that stuff. What could be the market rent? And we kind of went with, at that time, I think $1,000 per door. And we're like, all right, if we invested certain, we had a budget in mind and we stuck to it, then, $1,000 is kind of the goal, then it made sense numbers wise. Because even at that time, there were properties much higher, like over 100,000 per door. And well, now we're kind of like in that territory of buying a turnkey, but then you're not going to get that BRRRR effect. And we were looking to have that BRRRR opportunity. So I think that was where you have to really look for properties that you can add that value. So with that, all this stuff comes to play. Tenants, property condition, dealing contractors and subs. So yeah, you definitely have quite a number of things to consider when you're going through the process and making offers. And then also, once you make an offer, having the conditions, inspection contingency, and loan contingencies. So we didn't have a loan, but we still wanted the opportunity to have an inspection done on the property and the appraisal. And that really helped solidify the value of the building. I was like, all right, I mean, it checks out what we thought it was. It lines up. Because we knew the property needed work, but there's something really that we didn't notice, then it may have kind of like put the brakes on moving forward. Or if the acquisition,
or just like at least reassess it.
Yeah, exactly. Or renegotiate the seller. Say, whoa, like this is like foundation's crumbling. We're gonna spend $100,000 minimum. We have to knock the price down, type of thing, right? Something like that. And the same thing with the appraisal. If the appraisal came in like at $300,000, it's like, what are we doing? So that's another opportunity to either walk from it or go back to the seller and say, listen, I'm like, for whatever reason, the appraisal based on comps and the condition, I'm like, it's not coming in at this value. So you have to work with us or we'll just cancel. So, I mean, those are kind of considerations I think you need to kind of keep in mind. Even if you're buying it all cash, you want to kind of mitigate your risk with certain things.
Yeah, makes sense. And has anything changed? Like from back then to now, is there anything different that you do now that, let's say, you didn't do back then? Or is the process still pretty the same?
I'm like, in terms of processes, I think I have stronger contractors, ones that build deeper relationships with, ones that I can trust more. So if we have in terms of a budget, we can stick to it a lot easier, a lot firmer. Things always do come up. So I think that part of it, understanding the area. So after 5 years of investing in that area and buying a number of properties, you get much more comfortable. And I've got a wider network from, like I said, property managers, realtors, or other investors I can lean on to either go to the property or ask for some resources. So much more comfortable as the time, again, over 5 years. In terms of systems, processes, I think, you can create. I mean, for myself, I don't have a hard system I hand over to my contractors. A lot of times, for whatever reason, I have to have different contractors, and each one works a little bit different, but kind of lay the expectations up front. And whatever that is, like for myself, is like I need to have like a weekly update, not just kind of like a text, but more like actual seeing pictures and seeing the progress happening, or a video walkthrough and say, okay, this is what's happened this past week. And if there's issues or things haven't progressed, what are the reasons behind it? Not just my guy didn't show up, that sort of thing, right? So, everyone's got their own way of handling things. In the future, perhaps I even take a next step, like have a clear documentation, a checklist that I can hand over and say, okay, Mike, this is how I want things to kind of go in terms of scheduling or, providing the data or even uploading things into like a folder. So I try and create files in the cloud for each property, and they've got a number of different categories and folders. But at the same time, you got to load it up with the good stuff, with the proper information. So as I get information, I could pass it on. I could have it filed correctly. I'm in the process of hiring an operations manager, and I handle a lot of that stuff up, so even tweak it even more. Because ultimately, systems and processes are only good as you handle them or keep them up. Garbage in, garbage out. If you do a good job of implementing good information and organizing, that's gold.
Yeah, 100%. And what about the cash flow? Sorry, we missed the cash flow part. So were you cash positive after the refi?
Yeah, so
And
like
what
I
was your
mentioned, we're
like
about
per door?
35 to 40% equity in the property, but was able to cash flow itself. So again, at that time, if I'm thinking once you refinance, I think the mortgage payment was around 5-6 grand a month, 5 grand a month. Sorry, 4 grand a month. I think it was about 4% rate at that time. So 600,000 at 4% was around 4 grand. And then just the general tax, insurance, a few utilities for common areas, that sort of thing. But we were cash flowing at that time. With gross rents were probably around 7,500. So we were probably in the $15 to $2,000 cash flow range at that time. Since
Mm-hmm.
then, rents have gone up considerably.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been able to bump up the rents. So now I think for those 9 units, we're definitely over 10,000. We're probably closer to 11,000 gross. Expenses, things have gone up a bit. Insurance has gone up. Utilities have gone up a bit. But for the most part, it's still performing very well in terms of cash flow even today. And we've
Mm-hmm.
built in a considerable amount more equity. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
valuation of the property is probably in the 1.5, 1.6 range.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't even refied since. So, there's quite a bit
Mm-hmm.
of equity sitting in the property right now.
Yeah, there's probably quite a bit, especially that you've been paying it down.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That's
Yep.
amazing. Oh, so then at this unit, you you guys are you take care of everything like electricity, gas, like
No,
all
I
those
mean, there's separate
expenses?
meters. There are separate meters, but then there's common areas. There's a hallway,
Mm-hmm.
the electricity. There's the water. We maintain the water for the whole building, so we cover the water. And then there's separate gas. We've got the laundry room, so we handle that. The utilities for the laundry room. So there are some utilities that we do cover, but individual units they are separate metered. So the tenants handle that themselves.
Okay. And you said you have a laundry. Is it like the coin operated ones
Coin
or is it like
operated
a
ones.
different?
Coin operated ones. Yeah, we brought the coin operated ones in. The wall mounted ones. So you could just buy just a normal washer and dryer and then have the wall mounted and hook it up. And I mean, in terms of cost effectiveness, I mean, it's great. Those units cost like
Okay.
$500 and they hook up to a general, just a basic washer dryer. And for 9 units, it's fine. I mean, you don't have
Mm-hmm.
to go to high end and call in the third party to bring in their units. I mean, for 9 units, it works fine. It's really only the residential tenants upstairs for them, and then the barber shop, which is 5. The other units, well, there's a tattoo shop. He may use it time to time, but in general, it's sufficient. One washer, one dryer for a 9-unit building.
Mm-hmm. Oh wow, that's amazing. That's
Yeah.
great. It's great to see how well it went and like that even though it was stressful, um, you came out winning and maybe got an extra couple gray hairs out of it, but that's probably about it, right?
That's it, and I think, we have to expect that. I mean, it's real estate. We're dealing with
Mhm.
variables sometimes out of our control. You're dealing with people, tenants,
Exactly.
and then, you're dealing with property conditions. Sometimes we can't control from the weather or just, I mean, wear and tear on a building. So I think all of us need to consider it. It's going to happen. And the longer you
Hmm.
hold it, the closer you are to something happening.
So your last and final question, because I'm just curious, since this was an older project,
Yeah.
what would you say now? What is, with your experience now, what is like a big problem right now for you? Like, or that you've come up in the last few months or in the last year, like what is a problem that like stresses you now that that's new, let's say?
It's a good question. Yeah, I mean, the longer you're in real estate, I think you become accustomed to things coming up. Even on the last day prior to closing or selling a property. I just sold a property, and really the last day there was an issue because on title they didn't address the parking spot. It was a condo, so it's like, really? So something had to happen last minute, and then it thankfully got through. I mean, that was an issue. Actually, another issue on the same deal was. This is an interesting story. So it's a condo, and we basically put on the market, and we agreed to the price. They went firm, and we're working towards closing. And all of a sudden, the condo corp decided to do a special assessment in the middle of when they went firm and before closing. And they said, "Oh, it's an
Oh
extra
wow.
$7,000 this upcoming year that all the owners of the building have to pay for." And I'm like, well, I'm not paying that. And then the
Yeah.
buyer's like, I'm not paying that. So it was like this situation of whose issue is it? And even the lawyers were kind of like caught like, this is something like we gotta look into like prior court cases to see like who's who addresses this,
Yeah.
who
How does
handles
this
this.
impact?
Right, because they're like, well, we're buying this property, but I'm like, well, we agreed to a certain price. If I had known about a special assessment, I would ask for more, right? And then
Mhm.
from the buyer side, he's like, well, if I had known it's a special assessment, maybe I would have offered low. So my
Mhm.
lawyer's like, well, we have a pretty strong case from prior court cases. There have been a few examples that we can take it, but he's like, do you want to take it to court? Because the reality is like $7,000, like your court fees and lawyer fees, blah blah blah. I'm like, it's gonna add up. So I'm like, okay, well, listen, why don't we just split it and call it a day? So we went back, we pushed it back, and listen, I mean, we have a strong case to take this to court, but for the sake of everyone, let's just call it split down the middle, and we'll both pay half and half, and that's what ended up. They agreed, and that's what ended up happening. So
Mhm.
I'm like, something like that. I'm like, maybe a long time ago, like I would be a lot more kind of like stressed, but now it's like, all right, next.
Next.
It kind of like it happens. It comes up, and you just got to deal with it. So, I mean,
Yeah.
really, in terms of like problems, my problems are just opportunities. We're problem solvers. The longer you are in real estate, you're really a problem solver. So it's like a problem. Okay, this is my job now. My job is to solve this problem. So I don't look at it necessarily like, oh my gosh, like I had tenants before calling a spider infestation or tenant noise and blah blah blah. So it used to stress me out because they're texting me. Now it's like either a property manager or however I'll handle it. It's just like, okay, it's part of the business. It's part of this world I've created and stuff, right? So
Mhm.
I think, and I don't look at it necessarily as a problem, but more like opportunities. And some may be a little more difficult than others. But these days, I mean, more the problem really is finding good deals.
I know. And I completely agree with you when you talk about the problems. It's kind of like I guess your tolerance for stress becomes higher because you're kind of like, oh, something else, okay, we just need to solve it. And at least for me, I feel like I've also just I think before I had this feeling of oh my God, what if I can't solve it? Like, what if there's no solution? I don't know why I had these kind of like mentality back in the day.
Right,
Whereas, I think it was more like the fear, right? You're just like scared and you're just like thinking of every worst scenario that can happen.
right,
And the worst is if you can't fix it or something. And now it's exactly what you're saying, right? It's just kind of like, okay, who do I need to call to get this done and taken
right.
care of?
The
It
fear of
doesn't
the
become a
unknown.
stress anymore, I feel like.
I think human nature, we fear the unknown. And as a newer investor, you don't know what you don't know. So if you haven't faced something or faced enough challenges or situations and something happens, it'll kind of set you back. It's like, wait a minute, I wasn't prepared for this. I didn't know this can
Mhm.
happen. Like, why didn't someone tell me? Right?
Yeah.
So,
It'll shake your confidence for sure
yeah.
as a new
So I
person.
think just have that mindset, stuff will happen, be prepared. And, you can lean on others. You can contact people in the business and kind of get their opinions. But there
Mhm.
should be a solution to every situation. Some, unfortunately, cost more money than others, and that's just the nature of it. But in most instances, I mean, there problems. I mean, the resolutions are there. It's just a matter of like figuring it out, like a puzzle.
Mhm. Yeah, just don't be blind to it, right? It's just like you said, because another thing that you also brought up was that it is important to like talk to your community because it may also happen that because you're in it, you don't actually think of what is the solution. Because maybe you are stressed, especially as someone who's new. I feel like new people will you kind of like go into a spiral and then you
Yes.
kind of forget about other people and you're thinking to solve it yourself and maybe you
Yeah.
can't solve it yourself because you're in that spiral. Whereas if you're kind of talking to your community out there, then
Yeah.
someone will trigger you to say this, or maybe they don't know, but they're like, hey, this person has done that. That person has done that. Go talk to this person, that person, and someone will help you find a solution,
Yeah.
especially when you're much newer. And I mean, even when you're not, because like you said, like I feel like something new, you always, even with experience, as experienced investors, there will always be something new. I feel like it's either because you're leveling up or just because there's so many different things out there that can happen that there's always going to be, even for us experienced investors, and you even more than me, that we still all experience things come up that we've never experienced. And I mean,
Yeah.
even COVID, I think, is a big testament to that, because COVID, I think, tested everyone. It didn't matter, new to experience, to just like dealing with the whole new situations of how to deal with it. It's just helped us all like learn and realize we're always having to pivot and work and go with the flow, and like that, work as a team, work with our community to just figure it out and help each other out.
Yeah, I agree. I never pretend to know everything. I don't think any of us should. Ultimately, I
Mhm.
maybe have 10 years of experience from someone who's just starting off, but someone else has got 10 years experience over me. So I think it's definitely important that number one, you have that kind of mindset, constantly learning and want to constantly learn new things and apply it. And also, we all know the saying, your network is equals your net worth. So it's great to be part of a strong network. Create that network. Go build those relationships with other investors, more experienced, less experienced ones that you can add value to their lives, but more experienced ones to learn from. And that's what I constantly been doing over the years. I'm just part of different groups and just learning, absorbing, applying, and helping others and
And
so
even
on and so forth.
motivating, I would say. Because,
Yes.
like that, especially when you're in your downers, either because maybe you can't find a project or because you're, in the middle of problem, your community really helps, I feel like, to uplift you. Because
Yeah.
sometimes you put yourself in a downer, and just like, it's so true, right? That when you're around like-minded people, they will help lift you up when you go down, because it's like, oh, I got this going on or that, or they help you, they solve, and they kind of help lift you up. And
Hmm.
another valuable thing of your community is that they just help bring you up and do what they can, because everyone, like, especially if you have your core friends, like real estate friends specifically, they will always want to, obviously, like, everyone always wants to help everyone. I feel like if you have that good set of good friends,
Sure.
like, they will want to help you out. It doesn't even matter if you guys do the same real estate type of strategies. It's
Yeah.
like, I feel like it's, like, you want to help each other out.
I mean, absolutely. I think you got to think of giving before receiving. People reach out to me, just give them, help them in some capacity. Or they post something. Is there something you can add that will benefit them? Oh, you need to speak to so and so. Or, whoa, insurance. I got a great insurance guy. Maybe call so and so. I'm like, that's adding value. Down the line, if you post something or you're in need of something, it's much higher chance that they would help, those people will reciprocate and help you back. So again, it's a community. I mean, real estate
Mhm.
is, I was talking to a few people, I mean, this one particular person earlier today, and we realized we knew the same people. It's like, wow. I'm like, the community, as much as you think, oh, Canada or US, they're big countries and there's millions of people, yes. But I mean, real estate is just, is a smaller demographic, and over time, you will bump into different people and I mean, the same people. And it's good to know that I mean, so and so said, "Oh yeah, I spoke to so and so, and they mentioned you." Like, great, hopefully in a good thing, right? And the more
Yeah,
good you
exactly.
give, the more chance you're gonna receive, type of thing.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you so much. It was great to hear about your project. It was great
Thank
to
you.
hear your insights. It was awesome to have you on. Thank you.
Of course, thank you for having me, and wish you all a great afternoon. And yeah, I'm thankful.
Awesome. Bye, Thomas. Bye,
Take care.
everyone. We'll
Bye.
see you all at the next episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
And I always struggle to get this to turn off.